Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Verified Phenoms. We are still in the season of talking to real people that have had real results that are getting to the next stage of their life. And today we have with us Sador. He is a CRO and managing partner at Jafton and an angel investor at Fathom AI. Sador has experience running a software development agency working with Fortune 500 companies. He's been the youngest speaker to ever perform in the biggest business forum called Synergy Global and the biggest podcast conference called Podcast Movement, where he spoke among people like Mark Cuban, Gary Vee, and Richard Branson. Sador, thank you so much for taking time out of your Monday on this Monday, right? To be able to come on the show with us today. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you. How about yourself?
I am doing pretty good. I wish I would have had a little bit more sleep last night, but we're here now, so we're going to go ahead and have a great week. I'm very excited for it.
For sure.
So I like to start the show with I actually forgot to tell you this when we were talking just briefly. He said, "What?" I like to start off with some rapid fire questions just to get the flow of everything going. So I'm going to ask you a couple questions and just tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. Okay?
Sure.
All right. If you could visit any fictional world from a book or movie, where would you go?
Harry Potter.
What's one skill or hobby that you've always want to learn, but you never have had the time to learn it?
Skill, probably drawing.
It would be what?
Drawing.
Ooh, okay. If you could eliminate any one human limitation, like sleeping, aging, or eating, anything of that nature, what would it be and why?
I'd want to probably eliminate all of these. Yeah, it would be perfect. But probably aging. Aging is something I'm excited about, like that humanity's trying to tackle, and living longer, I think, would be cool.
I did think I just saw an article about that recently. What's the most profound piece of advice that you've ever heard, and how was it so impactful to you?
Probably the quote from Atomic Habits that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. So just how important systems are to me was very, very impactful. I have it on my wall, and this is just how I try to structure my life around,
James Clear, that's a gem. If you could invent a new holiday, what would it be?
Oh, Entrepreneur's Day.
Oh, I like that one. All right. And last one. If you could talk to any animal, what would it be?
Monkeys, probably.
Monkeys. Why monkeys?
Just because they're closest relative to humans, and wonder how they feel, not evolving to humans.
I can understand that. I think if I had to choose any animal, I think I would say squirrels. I just want to know, why are they always deciding to run into the street at the last second when they see all the cars driving by? Like, come on now. They need a stop sign. Out of everybody, they need a stop sign for sure.
Definitely, yeah. Biggest risk takers.
Biggest risk takers. And speaking of risk takers, so you have been in business for how many years now?
Well, I identify as an entrepreneur since age 10 when I started making my first money in middle school. So that'd be 15 years.
15 middle school. Okay.
Yeah.
So this sounds like a very familiar story from a lot of people that I've either interviewed or I just know. Personally, I was playing soccer in high school, and I used to go to Costco and just like Sam's Club and buy a whole bunch of soda and like snacks because we didn't have a vending machine. And so I would just throw all the snacks in my duffel bag and I was just selling them in the back of the classroom, to all the rest of my peers. So was that what you were doing?
Yeah, similar. But I did the same thing with video games at the age of 10. Like I would,
Video games.
Yeah, and I used to like sell them like virtually, like from my phone to another phone. I could like send it via Bluetooth and infinite distribution, and 100% margin because I don't have no cost to distribute this next unit of the game. It was all virtual. So
I had to ask, what year was this?
that was 2008.
what games were you sending from your phone in 2008 via Bluetooth?
It was the
It-
phone games. We remember the games on our phones, like Nokia phones, the Sony Ericsson, those times. Yeah,
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 you
yeah,
could
yeah.
do that.
Yeah, so I figured out a way because there was only two ways to do that back then. You could either download from online, and many people didn't have internet at home or just didn't know how to use it. Or the
Yeah,
second most popular way was there used to be these shops where you would come to internet shop and they would sell you each game. You know, they would plug your phone via cable to their computer and they would like upload the game to your phone. That was the way to go. And they would charge you per game. And they had this one of these shops next to our school. But I figured out a way how to do that from phone to phone because the trick was if you didn't install the file to your phone, you could send that as a file via Bluetooth to another phone and then unpack it there. And you could only do that on Sony Ericsson phones. You couldn't do that on Nokia's. So I took
wow,
advantage of that.
that's dope. Did you ever, by any chance, did you ever play Pokemon?
No, to be honest, no.
I was about to say, so with like the very early versions of Pokemon, there was something very similar with the same concept. Like you can only get certain like Pokemons or like go to certain maps within the game by going to like not necessarily like a shop, but it was like an event.
Hmm.
And they would have to wires like not wires like wire transfer it to your Game Boy.
Oh.
And then the only other way anybody else could get it is if you know transfer to them the same concept. That is cool. So how much were you selling the games for?
So in the local currency, they were selling it at 500 and I
Mm,
was selling it at 300, you know, cutting the price
mm,
down a little bit. At the time, it was probably quarter of a dollar, you know,
mm,
so around that. But, you know, the other shop was selling it at 50 cents. I was selling at a quarter, you know.
mm.
Yeah.
That's cool. So this started your entrepreneurship journey.
Yep.
If you were already doing that in middle school, what were you doing in high school?
Yeah. High school actually started, I mean, at 16, I think I had like, small online shop like selling things from the US back to Uzbekistan. And then when I went here, so at the age of 16, I came to the US and then I continued that for some time and then I shut it down because then it got a little harder because I was focusing on my school.
Mm,
So I took a pause for a little bit. But I always did something to make money, I always did like either an online shop or, reselling things or things of that nature,
mm,
while taking some pauses in between.
mm. How was
Yeah.
the transition for you coming to the US?
It was tough at first, especially because, I spoke the language already, but I
Mm,
didn't, I wasn't familiar with the culture and all that. So it was tough, but lucky for me, I was in an international school. So I had kids that weren't from my country, but they were from Russia. And because
mhm,
I grew up speaking Russian back home, I could, kind of be friends with them easier rather than like with Americans, it was harder because it was just different cultures. So it took some time. It took about 2 months for me to get really comfortable, but I still remember that time when I was like, I just got dropped off at the school. It was a boarding school too, so I had to live
mm,
there, and I came without
mm,
my parents, right? So I was on my own in a boarding school. Like my sister was like in New York, I was in Massachusetts. Like I could go visit my sister on holidays, but that's pretty much it. And I didn't have any other family member, but it really like it makes you mature real quick. I matured very fast because for the first time in my life I had to do my own laundry, I had to take care of my own schedule and all that. So it was a good experience. It was definitely something that really shaped me well and made me more mature.
And for all that happening, coming to a new country, around 16 years old, teenager.
Yeah.
For anybody that's listening to this right now, and maybe they're about to enter their own transitional phase in life, where they're about to enter an entirely new environment. Did you have any fears that you were experiencing, or just anything that you were just battling every single day as you took those 2 months to really get comfortable in your environment?
Um, yeah, I mean, I was battling just kind of being homesick. I was battling the new educational system that I wasn't very familiar with. A little bit of language barrier maybe in some ways, but it wasn't too big of a deal. Um, and then just being in a new environment overall. I mean, switching schools. I mean, I switched a lot of
Mm,
schools, but every time you do, it's a stress, right? Because it's a new community. You have to like find your spot there. You have to find your, especially kids, in school they're tough because they always it's like a survivorship type of thing,
mm.
and so it was definitely tough, and then there was some struggles, but I'm glad I was able to figure it out and stayed because some kids actually went back home. I remember like some of the classmates like they couldn't take it. They were too homesick and just couldn't find their spot, and they went back home. And I'm happy I sticked around. Yeah.
Love it. Out of curiosity, you were saying also that there were a lot of different students that spoke different languages. Did you ever start learning any of the languages that they spoke?
I wish I did probably with Spanish, but not really. No, my focus was like because I was sticking to my own like community of like Russian speaking kids, so
Hmm.
didn't really get to do that. A little bit of Turkish maybe because like was friends with some Turkish kids,
Mm,
and Turkish is similar to Uzbek, right? So it's easy
mm.
to learn. So I started a little bit of practicing Turkish, but not much to be honest. No,
If you could learn another language just instantly, which one would it be?
it'd first be Spanish,
Okay,
which I
okay,
know a
okay.
little bit of living in Miami now, but more. Yeah.
So I gotta ask you. We had a moment to talk about this earlier. I think it's really cool that you had an opportunity to go to this boarding school and just interact with a lot of different people of just different nationalities. And as a person that grows into their own career and they are essentially become an entrepreneur, or just maybe they're not entrepreneur but they're just within their own career, their own industry, networking is something that's very huge. And so when you're networking, you could be talking to anybody that has any type of experience, any type of background, all things of that nature. And it could be very intimidating when you are networking. So as you've continued to mature, and grow as an individual, how has networking been for you since you kind of got exposure to just getting to know with different people, different backgrounds when you were younger?
Yeah, so I started really actively diving into networking at the age of, I think it was 18. When I was in my first year in college, I just got to New York City. So, new city, I wanted to meet new people and everything. But yeah, every time I went at first, especially, it was hard because I had no experience like going on formal events, and everybody else around me was much older than me. I was probably the youngest in the crowd, 18-year
Mm,
old, so I had that, a little bit of imposter syndrome, right? Because it's like I didn't know what to talk about. I'm in college, I was starting a new Shopify store at the time, and I could talk a little bit about that and something else, but it was a little tough, but everything comes with practice. I mean, to this day, right now, I'm actually the organizer of networking events here in Miami. We have a networking event that we run every Tuesday on AI. So I've definitely gotten much better at it, but
mhm,
it took some time until I was, even when I was doing something already, like a year or two after, when I was already running a business, had something profitable, had it, I had a hard time just like articulating and owning that I'm
mm,
a business owner. And I would say, hey, what do you do? Type of questions I would answer like, oh well, I'm with this company, blah blah blah. I guess like the answer was so like not confident that people would ask me again, like, hey, oh sorry, you're a programmer? No, I'm actually one of the owners.
mm,
And then that people were like, "Oh, wow. Okay, cool." But, it was hard to like kind of own it up until some point, I guess, because I was afraid of other people's perception of me that, hey, this guy is young.
mm,
Although, if anything, I realize now people do admire that actually instead of like, being judgmental or anything. But at the time I didn't have that confidence to own it.
mm. So how long did it take you to really start to own up to that confidence or build that confidence?
I'd say even up until like this year, maybe,
Oh,
even
wow.
last year, I guess, yeah, it was hard for me to kind of like really say it. I guess, confidently. It took some practice, conscious practice, for me to start actually refining this answer. This specific answer, when people ask you like for the first time, what do you do? That
Mm-hmm.
answer, I guess, for me, like it took some time for me to refine it. And now I notice actually when I respond this year, people understand properly, right? But before it was like they weren't clear. Oh, so what's your role again within the company? After like 5 minutes into conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I would say pretty long time. I mean, when did I get involved with Jafton? That was like 4.5 years ago. So almost like 3.5 years out. It took about, for me to really own it up. Yeah.
Mm. I can relate to that so much. I've been working in broadcast, like television, for about 12 years now. And so I started in high school. I was 14 years old. And so I was also always the youngest person whenever I was on site somewhere. Everybody else that works in broadcast is typically, honestly, like 35 plus. Like
Mhm.
they are established in the industry. Then you have this 18, 19-year-old that comes out of nowhere. It's like, yeah, I have producer experience. I know how to direct a show or all this type of stuff. And I was just like, yeah, I'll just be grip. And for anybody that doesn't know what grip is essentially the person that just holds the cable for the camera
Mhm.
operator. So I didn't have that confidence to really let people know the expertise that I had of somebody that's in broadcast television at such a young age and be like, yeah, I can produce a show actually, even though I'm only 19 years old. So eventually, after I did a couple of shows and all things of that nature and just continue to do it, I gained that confidence myself to be able to eventually tell people like, yeah, I'm a producer. So when it came to your journey, 3.5 years now, you're finally getting the confidence to say it. You were saying that it was almost like a mental shift to be able to gain that confidence. What were some of those practices that you were in tension with to gain that confidence?
Yeah. So it was mainly just kind of in my head, first,
Hmm.
practicing this response, right? I mean, going back to how I responded when people got confused, I used to analyze, be like, all right, what did I say that was confusing? How do I start? For example, I could say something like, when I used to maybe say, when they ask me like, what do you do? I would say agency, software development agency. So like that doesn't say what's your role within that agency, right?
Hmm.
But then that's naturally, would confuse people. Be like, okay, oh, so you're a programmer or this and that. So now how I started is I flipped it to saying, first I identify as entrepreneur. So I say entrepreneur, and I say I'm the co-owner of Jafton.com. And then what Jafton.com comes after I describe that, right? So I used to start with what company does and then kind of leave off, like mumble what my role was within it. And and now it's actually the opposite. I say my role. First, I say my own identity. I say I'm
Hmm.
an entrepreneur. So that makes it clear first. You pause it, and then you say, you know, this and that role, after that. So it was that like mental practice in my head, and then applying and practicing it actually when I go in person and speak to people and testing, just testing. And then I realized, okay, when I start with the word entrepreneur and then I say co-owner, so I say the role and identity first, then people actually understanding. So it was this practice that really made it different. Then I just stick to it, because that worked out. Yeah.
Identity. That's huge. That's definitely huge. I think that has a lot to be able to gain confidence within the imposter syndrome, right? Being able to know exactly who you are and what you do. And that's something that I believe personally within the last 2 years, I've been gaining my own personal identity. And it's been so helpful in so many ways. Just be able to know yourself, just like, you know what? I'm a podcaster, right? Before, let's just say, even before this year, I probably would never told people that. But now that I have about 90 plus episodes I've recorded, nearing 100, it's kind of hard to ignore that type of identity. And to be able to receive feedback over the years, I'm like, you know what? Yes, I'm a podcaster. And that helps when talking to people as well. Same thing when I talk to people about being an author. At first, when I wrote my first book, I didn't necessarily want to tell people that I was an author because I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a good writer. I'm not. Like if a person were to read my writing, you're just like, huh. But I eventually realized it was the content inside the book, not necessarily like how it was written, the quality of it, but the content and the impact it had on other people's lives is what made me an author. So,
100%.
within, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it's it's like with identity, like James Clear says in the book, you every time you first pick the identity, and
Yeah.
then every time you do an action that supports that identity, you're
Yeah.
casting votes to support that identity in your own head, right? So by you identifying as an author first, but not being able to own it right away, it makes sense
Hmm.
because then you have to cast some votes. By every time you write that book, you are an author. Every
Hmm.
time you record a podcast, you are a podcaster, right? And then once you record 90 times, then you definitely own that in your head that you're a podcaster, right?
Right. Out of curiosity, what would you say are your top three books that you think everybody should read?
So as you probably guessed it, yeah,
Right. Atomic Habits.
Atomic Habits definitely one of the three. Yeah. If we're talking to everybody, I would just talk self-development, but I would probably just talk more about like entrepreneurs,
Okay.
listening, because that's like the closest to me, right? So if you're an entrepreneur, I would say either way, Atomic Habits is definitely like the foundation for everybody. But for entrepreneurs, I would read Lean Startup is definitely
Mhm.
a must read because it just defines what a proper minimum viable product is, and everybody should know it, whether you're in tech or not. Actually, right? It's just a really good concept. And then the third one would probably be um, Influence, the
Mhm.
by Robert Cialdini. It's book about psychology and just psychology of influence.
Mm. Lean startup, an
Yeah.
MVP, a minimum viable product. That when I learned what that was, I was like, this is genius. Like the concept essentially. And for anybody that doesn't know what I mean by that or what we mean by that, is essentially you have to figure out what is the bare minimum that you need to get something started. And in terms of, let's just talk about overthinking and perfectionism here. You know, a lot of people think they need all the moving pieces to get, the video recorded, the podcast started, the business started, all things of that nature. When in reality, let's just talk about for a podcast for 1 second. You can use the voice memo app on your phone and start recording there and just clean it up with now with AI being so popular, there are AI softwares that can clean up your audio for free. And you find a free hosting platform and now you start your podcast. You don't have to have a camera, a microphone, all things of that nature. The MVP, the minimum viable product, or is simply something that you already own. So when it comes to, let's just say, business, you know, what have you had to go through in terms of like an MVP? Like, did you experience like a lot of, perfectionism? Did you think that you had to have it all built out? How was that process for you?
Yeah, really good question. So yeah, when I was first starting out with my own products, I definitely had that little bit of overthinking and just kind of, paralysis through analysis type of thing. But yeah, for example, like when I was launching even my um like I was trying to launch a ride hailing app back in Uzbekistan at one
Mm.
point, like kind of an Uber competitor of sorts. And dude, I ended up never launching it because it was just so long for me to just like iterate and improve the product and this and that. So thank God I learned the lessons quickly. Right now, I'm actually one thing I pride myself in is like being able to launch an MVP very quick and very simply, and define the MVP before even like launching the MVP. Defining what your MVP proper MVP is actually a very important thing. And many people actually overthink it and they misunderstand what an MVP is. Most people think MVP is just a simpler version of the full product. No, it's not. It has to be like you said. It's the bare minimum of your product, right? Um, but I used to have those things, and I see that to this day in my clients every day. Like I said, they just think they overthink. They say it's an MVP, but it's really not. because they add so many different things in that are not necessary for the MVP to be launched. And I think why that happens is because people have a fear of launching something that they think might not be good enough, right? And so they try to compensate that by adding more and more and more features into the product, right? And that's just not the way to go. So I would say to this day, I've learned my own lesson for myself, but unfortunately I witness that every day with my clients.
Mm. How are you able to help them to truly understand what their MVP is?
I try to explain it really all the time. I explain it, and some people receive it well, some people don't. And I would say, unfortunately, more than half the people don't perceive it well. They think that I'm just trying to simplify and get things done quickly and take a shortcut. But, you know, I let them decide at the end because I don't want to be responsible for somebody else's decision. I do my best to, you know, influence that and help, but, to a certain extent, like, because people just if it fails then and you were the one who convinced the person to simplify and reduce the features,
Mhm.
you'd have that responsibility.
Right. Mm. So when it comes to your own MVP, what is that mental process for you?
I try to define it with, I ask myself, if I were to strip away everything and just leave one feature and then describe the product with that one feature in one sentence, how would I describe it? Right?
Mm.
That's the first question I ask. For example, a recent product we launched called Lando AI. It's in the generative AI space. The vision there is to be able to, describe to AI what kind of software or app you want to build, and then it just spits it out. Right? That's the vision. I mean, to build something like that, it would take a long time to build, right? So I simplified it. I said, if we were to strip away everything, how would we build it? And I brought it down to like, okay, what's the simplest thing to build? It's a website. Okay, what's the simplest website to build? It's a landing page. What's the simplest landing page to build? I'm going down this rabbit hole, and the answer for me was a landing page for an app, right? Like an app marketing landing page. And so we brought it down to that. And then what's the simplest way to describe an app? And the simplest way to describe that was to just throw in a link from App Store and then let the AI just read the page, right? Without you even having to describe. So at the end, it actually became a really cool product because it became one click website generator, and it generates a website in less than 30 seconds. All
Wow.
you have to do is just throw in a link to App Store and it reads the page and generates a marketing website for that app, right? But see, even though the vision is to one day be able to like describe an app that you want and then for it to produce that app, we're not there yet. The MVP was just like asking myself a question like, what's the simplest way to do this? What's the simple ways to do this again? So going down this rabbit hole to simplify and simplify and simplify and strip it down to the core. But at the same time, it's important to realize that whatever you have left at the end, that one feature, has to be something unique and new enough for the market that the market has not seen. If you strip away everything and leave something that the market has already seen, that's not really an MVP. Has to be something unique at the end, but everything else you can strip away.
Mm. We're not there yet. I think that was so powerful because that's what an MVP is. You understand that you got it started, but you still have in mind of where you want to go, but you're still in the process. For a lot of people that are in, let's just say they're a content creator, they're a business owner, anything, and they have this goal, how long, well, how long would you say, based on your experience and others that you've been around, maybe you have mentors and things of that nature, would you say it could take to get to where you want to go? Because I think that yet is so important because a lot of people, maybe the audience, they think that they need to be there in 6 months, 3 months, maybe even a year. But the fact that you're saying yet and you're still in this process right now, I would love to hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's another thing I was able to learn, is that everything takes time, and you got to be patient. So right now, I mentally prepare myself for 5 years every time I start something new. I say to myself, this will take 5 years to really get there. At the same time, I don't sleep on time and just, don't, slow myself down. Doesn't mean I have to be slow. It doesn't mean that everything has to happen in 5 years, and until 5 years, nothing will happen, right? But it's the gradual process. Like one of my favorite entrepreneurs, Gary Vee, says, macro patience, micro speed, right? So like in the day to day, you have to be super, super fast. And then the macro, you have to be patient. And that's the key for me, right? So mentally preparing for myself for 5 years. And then on the day to day, still, putting those goals and iterating on them on the short term as well.
Mm, 5 years. To some people, that may seem like a long time, but to others, it may be really, really short. Really, really
Yeah,
short.
that's another thing that my business partner and I were discussing recently. To me, 5 years still seems a lot. It doesn't seem like a small time because it's like I'm 25, so it's like 20% of my life. Think of it
Mm,
this way, right? For for him, when he's 40, it's less. It's like what less than that's about 1/8 of his life, right? So like it's a lot less. So it all comes down to proportion. I think the older you get, the better you get with time, the better relationship you have with time, because you've already lived so much and you've seen time go by quick. So for you, like a couple of years may not seem as slow as, for like if I tell 5 years to my 10-year-old
mhm.
nephew, it's 50% of his life. So you'll
Yeah.
say, no way, this is so long, you know? So it's all relative, like yesterday he was saying, he met one of these kids like in the neighborhood, and I'm saying, why are you not friends with him? He's like, well, because he's 7 years old and I'm nine, you know. And to him, that 2 year difference is like huge. And I
Yeah.
understand why, because that's like a big portion of his life.
Mm. First of all, I didn't realize you were 25. I'm 28. No, 27. I don't know. I stopped honestly, once I hit 25, I stopped counting.
He stopped counting. Yeah.
I stopped counting once I hit 25, and I
Yeah.
I will start counting again once I hit 30. But what you said is so true because once I hit, let's just say like 21 or so, time just kind of it just felt a little different. Like once I entered different stages of life, it started to move for me a little bit faster. And one thing I definitely think it helps once you have a certain clarity around what you want to do. Because when you don't have clarity, you're kind of just going with the like in the motions of just like not necessarily like experiencing life, but just going through it. But once and let me know your perspective on this. Like once you kind of know what you want to do, time seems like as if it starts to move faster because you're more attention with your daily routine, your habits and all things of that nature.
For sure, for sure. It's because, you don't have the anxiety of like, first of all, not knowing it brings you a lot of anxiety, right? So when you have a goal and you have that deadline, you become comfortable with that. You have to mentally accept that first, right? Then, of course, yeah, time moves faster. It does. It because you first of all you start enjoying the process, right? Because
Mm,
you eliminate that anxiety of like not knowing where you're going, right? You have a clear goal. You believe in it, and you're going there like with much more joy. So definitely, it doesn't seem. When does a time seem slow? Is when we're bored, right?
mm,
Like if you had nothing to do the whole day and you were locked up in a room and there was nothing to do, time would just slow down so much, right?
mm,
On the contrary, if you have so much to do, then the time goes by, right? So it's all about the intensity of what you're doing within that time, right? And having that clear deadline in your head that this will take X amount of years. And for sure, time will not seem slow, and it will go by
mm.
fast.
One thing when it comes to perfectionism, imposter syndrome, and even anxiety, having clarity of what you want can sometimes eliminate all of those things. I would love to know, how do you find your clarity?
I got to be honest, I still struggle with that.
Mhm.
I actually my business partner and I were like laughing the other day that he feels like I have bipolar sometimes because like I change my mind all the time.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that I don't have clarity, but it's something that I can be very excited about one product one day and then switch my excitement to something else. But I would say on an overall scale, I'm able to stay focused on one thing, while having a little bit of distractions in here and there. I think it's more of an entrepreneurial thing where you have this, what's called the shiny object syndrome, right? Where,
Yeah.
yeah, you want to pursue something else, you want to pursue something else all the time. Um, for me, having that clarity again comes from like just mentally having accepted that I'm not going to quit this business until we achieve X in valuation, for example, right?
Mhm.
And I know what that number for me is. I know we're getting there. So to me, seeing the progress over the years that we're getting there and having that goal over there is what creates that clarity, because otherwise I would have been distracted and trying 5 new things every week. It wouldn't work out. So I would say just tying it to a clear goal and again, mentally accepting the timeline it will take to get there.
Mhm. Tying it to a clear goal. Speaking of which, I only have about 2 more questions because, again, I want to respect your time here. So the first one is going to be, considering about 20% of your life, what was success to you 5 years ago, and what would you say success is to you now?
It's probably relatively the same. I mean, maybe just, you know, 5 years ago was more like monetary and finance type of thing. So if anything, that stayed, but I added more things to that definition of success, especially like 3 years ago when I was going through this coaching session, first personal development coaching session, where we had to define our values,
Mhm.
right? And I did define one of my core values being family, right? So for me, like having built my own like happy family is part of success that I might have not th- thought about 5 years ago. Probably haven't. Yeah, it's more like obsessing over money and just like that. Which again, money wise and finance wise, still there. There's still some goals that I have to hit, but I would say I've added more things like family, definitely one of them. Um, Health is a big one. Health, yeah, being healthy and just the healthiest version of myself throughout my life. I used to think of like I can just bail on my health right now and just like work 20 hours and just take care of it later.
Mhm.
But I realize it will backfire if I do that. So trying to balance that as well, like while working, still taking care of my health. So I'd say these two more aspects got added, right? Family and health to the definition of success. And I'm sure there'll be more added within years.
Yeah, as you grow, the version of success to you will also grow as well.
100%.
So for anybody that may be your age, they're 25, and they're looking to be maybe in the stage of life that you're in right now, what advice would you give to them?
One thing that can really change your life real quickly, no matter where you are, is meeting the right people. For me, for example, I was meeting certain right people. Like I met Babir at the right time. That changed my life, and I met a few other people that really influenced me. So I would say prioritize networking, prioritize strategic networking. Meaning, if you met the right person, stick to them and try to like nourish that relationship. And sometimes some of the people you want to be close with, you got to actively go seek them out, and they may not really be as actively looking for you, but if you put in effort, you can really get into their circle, so to say, right? So I'd say strategic networking is one thing that I would focus on. if you want to kind of level up to a certain level. It's like that saying, you're the average of 5 people that you surround yourself with, right? Again, it just can't be understated. It's just the golden rule to live by. Audit your inner circle and then try to take it to the next level strategically, actively, proactively, because again, just meeting one right person at a networking event is not enough. You have to then follow up with them. You have to stay in touch with them. You have to invite them for coffee. If they don't go, you got to invite again. You got to be proactive. You got to do some things just to kind of nourish that relationship until, it becomes close enough.
Mm. And lastly, how can people find you and how can they support you?
You can find me online if you just type in my name on Google, Sardor Akhmedov. Biggest, most active platform I'm on is LinkedIn. So if you just text me on LinkedIn, I'd be happy to respond. And any other social media, Instagram, X, these are my main. Yeah.
Well, Sador, I want to say again, thank you so much for taking time out of your Monday morning to be with us today. You dropped so many gems. It was a pleasure.
Thank you so much, Phenom, for having me. I really enjoy being here, and looking forward to coming back to this podcast in a few years and share more knowledge and catching up with yourself.
We'll have to see where success to you is 5 years from now, for sure.
Let's
Well,
revisit that.
again, y'all, this has been another episode of Verified Phenoms. I'm your host, Phenom, and we will catch you on the very next episode.